Good evening. We're going to call this work session, or this rule development workshop, to order, where tonight we will be reviewing policies JB, IA, IMDB, JCA, and JLCD. Superintendent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our attorneys and staff will walk us through using a PowerPoint. As you've mentioned, the order will start with JB, followed by IA, then IMDB, then JCA, and finally JLCD, in that order. Mr. Palmerini.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Starting off with the agenda tonight, we're going to give you an overview of the process that we're going through and the timelines. We're also going to give a summary of the actions on these policy revisions, and we will, of course, open the floor to questions and discussions. The purpose of these revisions, or the creation of these policies, of course, are to provide a uniform and systematic method of procurement to assure compliance with all applicable federal, state laws, State Board of Education rule, federal rules, board policies, procedures, and guidelines. And it's also, these revisions are to promote transparency and accountability in the expenditure of public funds and the use of public resources. The tentative schedule that we have here, of course, these were discussed in Cabinet on September the 4th. We are here for the Rule Development Workshop of September the 13th. If you all give the go-ahead on these policy revisions, we will have final approval of these policies on September 25th at your board meeting that day, and the effective date of these policies will be upon your approval that night. We are revising 5 policies. JB, the Equal Opportunities for Students. IA, our Student Progression Plan. IMDB, our Flag Display and State Motto policy. JCA, Assignments of Students to Schools. And JLCD, Administering Medicines to Students. And I have the first policy revision, JB, Equal Opportunities in Education. What we're doing with this policy is we're updating our Equal Opportunities in Education policy in light of recommendations that we received from the United States Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. And revisions have been made to the existing policy language to include content, formatting, and terminology edits consistent with recommendations from the Office of Civil Rights that we received. Currently in our policy, we use the term substantially with respect to interference. 3 separate times, the Office of Civil Rights, I'm sorry, I did not mean to hit the button, my apologies. The Office of Civil Rights recommended removal of the term substantial from the policy, and it's mostly in our, okay.
Stop hitting the button.
I'm not hitting the button, it's on the time. We may be on a timer here where it's going through, so give us 1 second. I think so.
Just says on mouse click.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
There we go. Okay. We've removed substantially 3 separate times in the policy, and it's mostly in our definition section. The policy previously said harassment includes anything that has the effect of substantially interfering with a student's educational performance, opportunities, or benefits. Or the policy said harassment includes anything that has the effect of substantially disrupting the orderly operation of a school or work location. The Office of Civil Rights recommended that we remove substantially, and that's what we've done. Our policy also referenced the OCPS and Employee Relations Department with respect to investigations of these complaints. Employee Relations name has changed to Professional Standards, so we are making the change to Professional Standards. With respect to the timeline to investigate, the previous policy required the student to report incidents that occur outside of the school in the course of a school-related activity within 24 hours or no more than 2 school days after the alleged harassment occurred. The Office of Civil Rights says we have the responsibility to investigate complaints upon notice regardless of the timelines outlined in the policy. So if a student brings a complaint, we have a responsibility under federal law and statute to investigate, and we've removed that timeline from the policy. And under our previous policy with respect to obligations to investigate, our previous policy required OCPS to create a process for referral to the appropriate jurisdiction if not within the scope of OCPS, i.e. to law enforcement. The Office of Civil Rights recommended the change that we have, our policy states that we have an independent obligation to investigate under Title IX to address allegations of sexual harassment regardless of police involvement and or any other pending criminal matters. So our process of investigating sexual harassment would go at the same time as any law enforcement investigation of any potential criminal activity. And those are the changes in policy JB.
Good afternoon.
Before we go forward, Mr. Chair, do you want, or members of the board, do you want to take them each, and there's 5 of them, you want to take them all through? Okay.
Yeah, I thought we would go all the way through, and then I'll make the announcements. Any member of the public come to give us any commentary on any of them.
Okay, and
Or
just
do we need to do it otherwise?
as a point of reference, I know
Yeah.
you may think we have 6 lawyers for only 4 policies, but we really do assign them based on their areas of specialty. So that's why they're tasked out there. So
Is Mary now a lawyer?
Absolutely not.
God bless you.
I'll be going over the IA, the Student Progression Plan. The first revision in the progression plan this year is to add elementary free play to the plan. The purpose of this policy is to stress physical fitness and encourage healthy, active lifestyles for students pre-K through grade 12. In the elementary scheduling requirements, 100 minutes of unstructured free play each week has been added. Previously, there was no language in the SPP concerning unstructured free play. The school board does currently have this provision in the wellness plan. Since the state enacted this requirement for elementary schools, it was determined that it should also be added as a requirement in the student progression plan. The revision states that elementary scheduling will include 100 minutes of supervised, unstructured free play recess each week for students in kindergarten through grade 5. The second provision has to do with PE waivers. This provision is to require documentation from parents each year to support the need for a PE waiver. Currently, there was no language to support documentation for PE waivers. The revision adds that documentation must be provided each year that a parent or guardian is requesting to waive physical education. In our high school section, graduation requirements have changed to allow for apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship courses to meet the graduation requirement for performing arts, speech and debate, practical arts, or elective credits. Currently, there is no language on apprenticeships or pre-apprenticeships. The revision was to add language to include, with the completion of a Department of Education registered apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship program, students may satisfy a graduation requirement for fine or performing arts, speech and debate, practical arts, or electives.
Good afternoon. I have policy IMDB, that's flag displays and state motto. This policy was changed because of legislative changes that came through in the last session that basically now requires us to display the state motto in all of our buildings in a conspicuous location. So what we did is add it to our policy. The policy was previously called just flag display, so we changed the title to flag displays and state motto. And in addition to that, we added the language from House Bill 7055 that requires us to post the state motto in a conspicuous place in our buildings, as required by the legislation as well.
Good afternoon. We're going to present JCA, Assignment of Students to Schools. The purpose of the policy revision is to promote transparency and accountability in the student admission and transfer process. And we are trying to assure compliance with all applicable federal and state laws, as well as all administrative rules, procedures, and guidelines.
So currently, we have I'm sorry. The description, change of address, in our policy, we have any change of address requires a new transfer application. We simplified it to say that it must be updated and reviewed to see if the transfer may remain in effect. The circumstances, different transfers are entitled circumstances, and we've now changed that to transfers. We have changed the mid-year transfer title to academic year completion, so there's no confusion on what the transfer is allowing. The review of the transfers, we do that, right now it says each year, and the new wording says throughout a year, and the transfer may be revoked through the Office of Student Enrollment with the principal and his or her supervisor's approval as permitted by law. And it replaces all references to the revocation of a transfer throughout the policy. Under Mackay Scholarships, it right now says the department is the Mackay office, and we've changed that to reflect the ESE department. And the Mackay Scholarships now says process throughout the year, and it's changed to process as required by the Mackay Scholarship Program as that changes from year to year. The requests are made via email, and it gave an address, and now it says all requests are made via the public request form found on our website. And academic, the description, we started with a student's desire to complete a sequential, and now it says a continuation of a sequential academic course of study. Also under academic, we had enrollment in strings, and the current policy read a desire to enroll in strings, not springs, strings. And that language was removed as now all middle and high school have both course and strings, making this transfer piece not necessary. The conditions require a final course grade of C or better. It keeps the same course grade requirement and adds that the student maintain a 2.0 or higher overall GPA. And the transfer may be revoked if the course grade falls below a C or the overall GPA falls below 2.0. And the conditions, we currently have a student who exits the designated course must return to his or her assigned school. It keeps the same requirement and adds is not eligible for the rising 8th or 12th grade transfer. Under controlled open enrollment, we currently have that if you live in Orange County, the transfer window is from February 1st through May 31st. And if it's out of county, it's May 1 through May 31st. Our revision would have the process for both families living inside and outside of Orange County from February 1 through May 31st. And the approval list, we have the current policy language reads, the receiving school must have available capacity and be on the approval list. Our new policy cleans up the language a little bit, saying keeps the same language but adds that the list is published by the Office of Student Enrollment. The change of residence for rising 5th, 8th, or 12th grade students, that's our title now. We simplified it to call it rising 5th, 8th, or 12th grade students. The change of residence for rising 5th, 8th grade, right now there's no verbiage in there, but it does change it to the requires that the guardian to be moving within Orange County to ask for this transfer. Also, the dates of the move, right now we have allows rising 5th, 8th, or 12th grade students who guardian moves during the school year to apply for the transfer. It adds a little bit that we have now, but adds during the subsequent summer to apply for the transfer to give it the broader spectrum that we look for. And magnet transfers, we currently have from November 1st through February 15th, and provides for a second processing period. Magnet Office has us change that to removes the second processing period and explains the lottery process. The eligibility, we don't put anything in there. We haven't. And you can see that we added a little bit of language to be consistent with the remainder of the policy. And a student can be transferred to the next nearest school for OCPS staff. I jumped, I apologize. For staff transfer, we added the language, a student can be transferred to the next nearest qualified school if the school of employment does not serve the current grade level. So if I'm at an elementary school, I can ask to have my child move to the next nearest middle or high school. And then the eligibility, we did add the language that the transfer would be revoked if the student's guardian leaves OCPS employment. Hope Scholarship.
So I'm going to go over the Hope Scholarship because it's the language that we added to the policy is pretty much directly out of the statute. So obviously that wasn't in there before. A statute was just passed. It's 1002.40, and it's for the upcoming 2018-19 school year, so it applies this year and beyond. The processing time, again, begins with the first day of this school year, and after that does not apply retroactively. The eligibility description, you have to qualify for the transfer, you have to be subjected to a specific incident as listed within the statute, and those incidents are battery, harassment, hazing, bullying, kidnapping, a physical attack, robbery, a sexual offense, a threat or intimidation, or fighting. The incident must be reported to the principal, and the Hope Scholarship notification form must be signed. The list of available receiving schools is revised and published by the Office of Student Enrollment. So the schools that we have available to transfer these students to under the Hope Scholarship have to have capacity. So that's why that's on there. The student must stay in attendance for the entire school year unless there's a change of address or the student is excused for another good cause. An approved transfer is valid for the duration of all grade levels at the school. Sibling transfers do not apply. Transportation is not provided by OCPS unless required under board policy, federal law, or Florida statutes. The list of approved receiving schools with capacity may be modified by OCPS. An approved transfer may be revoked if not immediately utilized and the receiving school no longer has capacity. And the qualifying incident must have occurred during the 2018-19 school year and beyond. And again, that's just statutory authority and minor language formatting edits throughout the policy to ensure we're in compliance with all of those.
Good afternoon. The next policy is JLCD, and it's administering medicines to students. The purpose is it updates language used in the administration of medication to students during school hours, and revisions have been made to the existing policy language to include content formatting and terminology edits consistent with statutory language. The title has been changed from administration of medication during school hours. We added to students in that title. What did I just do here? There we go. Yeah, it goes. The current policy said that each principal shall designate a person on the staff to administer medications according to guidelines. We added established by superintendent or designee. The next is administration of medical marijuana to students during school hours. This establishes procedures for the administration of medical marijuana to students during school hours. It's a creation and addition of a policy to administer medical marijuana to students during school hours. And no policy existed, so the policy that was created has been implemented, or will maybe implemented. We'll see about that. And the next steps are revisions to internal procedures and training for internal OCPS employees regarding revisions to policies and new procedures.
Members of the board, that concludes our presentation for the 5 policies that we are reviewing for tonight. Happy to answer any questions you might have, hear your discussion and direction to move forward. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. Before we go any further, is there any member of the public who has arrived tonight or would like to provide us with comment on proposed policy changes to policy IA, IMDB, JB, JCA, or JCLD? If you are here, please fill out a yellow speaker card and let us know before we go any further. All right, seeing none that I'm aware of, Ms. Gould?
I had a question on the Hope Scholarship. It always has to be the new one, you know? I know in the policy, and this may be reflective of the law, that the bullying has to be fully documented. But there's often, and I've run into this twice with young people so far this year, there's some cases where bullying may have happened, but they don't want to report, but they want to flee. They don't want to call out names. They don't want to, in one case, they were going to continue to see some of these fellow students through the sports program that they're in. But it was just an untenuous situation to be in school with them. Is there some way to handle cases like that you just kind of know, or is there a documentation without it being a public record, or?
So as of right now, the way the statute reads, it has to be reported in order for the Hope Scholarship to be implemented.
Mm-hmm.
So without a report, we wouldn't know. But if a student is uncomfortable with disclosing the other student's information, the way that we've interpreted the statute is that we are going to notify the parent of the Hope Scholarship upon report. So even if we do the investigation and it turns out that they don't want to give us information or it becomes unsubstantiated, the parent still has the opportunity to apply for the Hope Scholarship program and change schools to a school that has capacity.
Okay, so if the parent knows and they're reporting it, that's how we're handling it, so that, okay. All right, thank you.
So along the same lines, I had a question on the Hope Scholarships. I understand the capacity transfers, but am I confused at all? Does it also include a voucher option?
What do you mean by voucher?
A voucher to go to a private provider? I thought it did.
So it does. So in the letter that goes home to the parents, it says that either they can go through the Florida Department of Education and apply for the private school tuition assistance, or they can take the notification form to our Office of Student Enrollment and apply for the Hope Scholarship transfer.
Okay. And if they take advantage of that transfer, I'm just sort of curious how it works mechanically. Do they then, is that student then reported to the Department of Education and that FTE funding goes directly to that private school, or what level of funding does the private school get, if you know?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, Sarah, I'm looking at Ms. Fernandez because, no offense, but she lobbied it for us, she may know.
I believe the amount is $6,500 or $7,000, one or the other. And it would go to the parent. The parent would then, use that voucher to enroll their child in a private school. There's also a $750 transportation voucher that the parent is eligible for.
Really? Wow. Last.
Mr. Chair, that's assuming that there's funding for it, and we don't know what the funding is going to look like. You might be able to elaborate a little bit more on that, because it's a first come, first serve, I think. A lot of the districts are still trying to figure out how they're going to implement it. We've gotten very little direction from the Department of Education on this, so.
It is first come, first serve, and I know the state was having issues with the funding portion of it because it's being funded with car sales. If you remember, it's $105 that when you purchase a car, you can designate to go into the voucher fund, if you will.
Okay, I had forgotten that. So it's not just straight FTE funding out of the FEFP, it's from that pot of money. Well, that's encouraging. I hate to be a smart aleck, but they'll find a way to fund it, trust me. No, seriously, they will. They will. If the funding's not there through the car sales, they'll come up with another means. So one last question on it. On the capacity transfers, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Colbert. On the capacity transfers, under the Hope Scholarship, do we define capacity schools in the same way we define capacity schools for out-of-county transfers? So there's only a finite list of 15 to 20 schools that have capacity, I would assume? 22, okay. Cool. All right, thank you. Ms. Colbert?
Just a clarification on the recess portion. In the synopsis, it says 100 minutes of supervised unstructured free play, but it still says, it looks like on BoardDocs in the policy, it does say 20 consecutive minutes per day. So is that,
In the legislation, it actually says both. It says 100 minutes with 20 minutes per day.
okay.
And so
So do we need to define that in our policy, the 20 minutes daily? Because 100 minutes could be 3 days of 33 minutes.
actually, do we have I believe.
It looks like in our red line policy, it's in there with the 20 minutes daily.
So it is in there. It just wasn't on the PowerPoint.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
That's, I just wanted to
Yes.
clarify that
Yeah.
for the public. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Flynn?
Thank you. Regarding, and I'm so sorry, I can't find it right away, but regarding the application period for open enrollment, I thought when we first started that we gave OCPS, or Orange County residents, first shot, and then we had a small window at the end. It looks like that's been combined?
Yes, because what we have done is when the lottery runs, the first ones go through are from Orange County.
Okay.
So if all the Orange County seats are taken, then someone from out of county does not have an opportunity. So once we got the lottery running and it was nice and clean, being able to take them both at the same time
Makes
just makes
sense.
it easier for everybody.
Makes sense. Okay, so
Okay.
I just wanted to see about that priority.
Yeah, no, Orange County first, and that's by law, that we in district first.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Mrs. Gordon?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so very much for all of this. This is wonderful clarification. I did want to ask about the assignment of students to school, but I really want to go through each of them, not now, but later, so that I could really understand, because I did have the employees calling, and I did hear you say that if they left that school,
They can stay.
that the child has to leave also?
No, ma'am. If they leave the employee of Orange County Public Schools, then the transfer is revoked, and it's generally at the end of the year, that school year.
Okay.
If the parent leaves the school because they were the assistant principal there and they got moved to another school or took a principalship or whatever, the child can still remain and complete at that school.
Right, and I had calls in reference to that where teachers either got promoted, maybe from being a teacher to a CRT, or they moved as a dean.
Right.
And they were asking why couldn't they let their kids at least fill out that year?
They can.
But I didn't see reference. Help me with that one, please.
Okay, in the policy itself, it says that the students they're there for the grade level, from K to 5, 6, 8, or 9, 12. So if the parent leaves the school and takes a job elsewhere, the child still may remain at that school that they received the transfer to until they complete the highest grade level at that school.
Very good. Okay, then another question in reference to this that I still get calls on. If the choice thing with the living in the district, the date, everybody is confused on when does the governor's choice, where space is available, this board came up with the space available. I didn't know that his signee died, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know. I didn't keep up with that, but they're saying that if they don't get it in at a certain time, they no longer fall under the governor's gift to them. So help me with that, and then I have something else to say about that.
Our transfer window for the majority of the transfers discussed this evening is from February 1st through May 31st. That includes the controlled open enrollment capacity transfer, the one you were referring to.
So if somebody comes in from another state and they're in Florida and they fall under that, so why are we penalizing them for counting?
I'm not penalizing them.
I didn't say you were.
But we are not penalizing them. We're holding them to the same standard as we do folks that live within the county.
No, but I'm saying, but they lived in the state. They lived in one of this is the governor. The
apply.
governor governs 68 counties.
They can apply. If they
Yeah, but if
apply-
they miss that deadline,
That's true.
well, that's a problem.
Okay.
And I think it's unfair, and that's not equity. I think that if they're in, I can understand if it's New York or coming for any of the other 49 states. But I think if they were in Miami and they moved here and the governor said whatever, I think that that's something that the legal department needs to look into, Madam Superintendent, for us. Because I really think that we need to ask them, especially with a new leadership going into Tallahassee. That's not fair. If I lived in Duval County and I live in a neighborhood and I know you have space available there, and you assign my student elsewhere, my child elsewhere, the reason why I have people wanting to come here and they don't want to come because they missed that deadline or something, but yet they've been offered positions and they are letting that hold back and they don't talk about it. So I just think that if you're in Florida, that you should be entitled to it. I don't know, I had Daryl saying something, but I don't know, I'm not clear on that, so maybe you could, I think it need to be clearer than what it is. Okay, let me go to the next one, so maybe I could get with the legal department and find out what's what, because that came out of Tallahassee.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, Woody, is that something that, you understand what I'm trying to say? Because I'm hearing you saying one thing there, but I'm hearing the people calling saying something else. And it's just not, I don't get the three things. What's on this paper, what you're saying, which is good, and what they're saying, it does not, and it might need to be handled on an individual basis. But I think the data's conflicting, it just should be open. Because what if space comes available? Now you got an empty seat in that school. Even though they didn't meet, they got that little February, May.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, then the other one was I was concerned about the 100 minutes of supervised. Did we delegate who is going to be out there supervising? Which staff is obligated to go out there in unstructured play and just sit and watch?
For the progression plan, we don't normally in the progression plan put those, that amount of detail into how it will be accomplished.
No,
So
that's not my question.
What are you
sweetie.
asking?
My question is 100 minutes of supervised, unstructured free play. And it has to be, you stated, each week. So I'm assuming each week, and if we're in a 4 or 5 weeks, then somebody has to be out there. I'm not asking what you put in the plan. I'm asking who's going to be going out there, which staff will be authorized to go.
Right, it's 20 minutes a day, and so it's scheduled into the schedule, and I think at each school.
I heard all that.
Right, I think each school either has their teachers out there or other staff members that will watch, paraprofessionals, different type of staff members that are watching for
But you really
recess.
don't know right now, do you?
I don't personally.
Okay, I think, Dr. Jenkins, if you all could find out for me, because I've had a question to come to me, who's going to be out there supervising? Will it be the paraprofessional? Will it be teachers? Since they have to have it every week, who is going to be delegate? Are we going to volunteer, or what time is taken away from them to go out there? Will that time be made up again? Say if I have to go out there during the little supervised time, which we volunteer in our school to do a lot of things, but just I would like to know, and concerned citizens would like to know, who's watching their children? Who will be watching them?
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Gordon, it is the teacher or the paraprofessional, but we can get you more detail by school for your interest. We'll certainly get that for you.
Well, Dr. Jenkins, I don't think it's just my interest. Wouldn't you want to know who's watching the kids?
Well, that's all we have are teachers and paraprofessionals, but
Well, we have volunteers. We also have awesome volunteers in our schools. that may consider doing that. They've all gone through a background check. We may consider allowing them to go through safety procedures on how to watch. Remember, it is unsupervised. And I feel that the teachers and staff members' time could be used better based on what we have to go through right now with all of the new changes, with evaluations and procedures. And teachers say now that they don't have enough time for planning. We've heard that. And I'm not speaking for teachers. I'm speaking for parents. And they're concerned. They pretty much, Dr. Jenkins, would like to know who you're going to have your administrative staff put in charge since they fought for it to supervise their children.
Okay, we'll
Thank
get it
you.
for you.
Ms. Gould?
I was just rereading the medical marijuana.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, when we were kind of getting educated on this before it actually passed and right after, they said it couldn't be a prescription, it was a referral, but I see in the policy it says prescription. Is in our state it referred to as a prescription versus a referral?
It's my understanding that it is, and I would have to look in the statute to see
Okay.
if the word is prescribed or if it's referred. It is a doctor that is certified to make the recommendations for medical marijuana.
Right.
It's my understanding it's a prescription. I would have to look back in the statute.
Because
to
it's
see
not
if
on
we
the
use-
formulary. That's why I think there was discussion about it being,
I can-
and it's more just to make sure that we are consistent in how we talk about it and if and when it ever gets on the formulary. But it just says prescribe. It may be somebody who's prescribing, but I don't know that they're called prescriptions unless they change it. And I was trying to look it up online, but I couldn't find it.
I'm going to look, I have the statute in front of me.
Okay.
If you'd like me to.
Yeah, just so that we're matching it. I mean, that's just an ministerial.
And Ms. Gould, I think that is right, actually, that you don't prescribe. The doctors can't write a prescription, so
It's like a referral, I
it's like
think.
a referral, right? So
That's what they call it in Colorado. They call it a referral.
if we determine that's the case, and I think what we may do is correct it and obviously
Yeah,
bring
that's
it
all.
back.
That's all. I was just looking through it, and because it is handled differently from a medical legal perspective, which is why hospitals can't administer it because it's not on the formulary as a prescription drug. So
I believe actually, hold on. Looking, I think right now it does say prescription. It says for physician certification, a qualified physician may issue a physician, it's called a physician certification, I believe. We'll look into it. I'll change it if we need to change it.
Mrs. Gordon?
Yes, thank you so very much. I
Ma'am, it's-
really, thank you
It's called
all.
a physician certification pursuant to the statute, so we will change that.
all right, thank you very much.
I'm impressed with your knowledge of marijuana.
Hey, wait, before that gets on the record. No, it's actually because I worked in healthcare for 20 years, and I have had this discussion with the administrators of both hospitals.
That's not what we heard.
It's a physician certification.
Okay, you can be.
That's a joke for anybody listening to this recording.
Right? I know. Bill bothered you. But Bill, the chairman brought it up. I just couldn't. Okay, since we're talking about the medication, I think that these 5 people are leaving the board. Why am I getting these calls now? I know my district is not calling about any of this because you know how we do over there. We do what we have to do. Okay, so I think I'm getting your calls again, okay? But we're back with the medication. I'm serious. I know they're talking about pills, but I did receive a call from a person, and Dr. Jenkins, I did wonder if it was I better not say it, but it's a project we all are working on to help the children, and they do have pets, and they do have animals, and that is a form of medication. It's a mental form of medication, and they ask, what are we going to do when we bring all of these children together, and they are used to people coming up to the school and visiting and bringing a service pet, the service dog. How are we going to address that? Because the service pets and the service dogs have been better than the marijuana, okay? And they want to know, would we consider this? And I suggested that the best thing I could do, since you were looking at all of these different resources, maybe we could come up with a type of policy. I don't know if it would be for the special, schools where the students are receiving treatment, but would that be fair? And that's what I thought about. Would they be able to bring Johnny's acting up like at my school? But I'm gonna be honest with you, when we bring in Henrietta the hen, and Henrietta lays the eggs, I'm being honest, we have no trouble whatsoever out of this student. Because he begins to talk about the chicken and the eggs and how it happens, and he goes on, and then he talks to the other kids, he goes into writing. I'm not kidding. You all don't know, I tell you. So I promised that I would bring it up. I think it's a great idea. I don't know how we would administer it and how we would do it, but I believe it's going to happen because everybody's taking their service pet someplace. And people don't want to leave them behind. And some of the kids are new. They've never been in public school before. They're switching over. And some have never been in first grade or kindergarten. So it's kind of interesting. So, Dr. Jenkins, I will turn that over to you and the chairman.
Ms. Gordon, the
legal counsel.
I don't know what she did in the previous life, but Ms. Cora not only has the marijuana policy, she has the service animals policy, and that's already been adopted by y'all, but we can certainly review that.
I didn't know that, and I didn't see that.
Well, it's not here today. It's IMG, and it's already in place, but I'm sure any additional information on that policy, she's well-versed in that one as well.
Okay, well then, let me ask her this.
Sure.
Are you including, like we're getting ready now to put together behavioral center? How, I can't remember, I know we talked about it, but I really don't remember. So give me a little bit about it so I could go back and not have to go look it all up right now.
Sure. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act and all of the corresponding laws from the federal government, we are required to allow students and faculty to bring service animals onto campus.
But is this in every school?
Any person, a student, or a teacher who has a service animal. Now, there is a delineation between service animals and therapy animals. A service animal actually does a task where a therapy animal makes someone feel better. So we do not allow therapy animals for personal students or teachers, because then any student that says they are upset would potentially be able to bring their animal with them on campus.
That's what I'm talking about. They're asking us to allow, and I don't remember that happening when we did do something reference to it, because we felt that everybody would be bringing their dogs. But I'm telling you, that individual people do want to do that.
And I understand that.
So what are we going to do? Tell them no?
Yes, ma'am, that's what we have been doing. We
They don't
do
want
have
you
a
to.
provision.
So they must have been told that and why they call.
We do have a provision for students on campus that if there is a curricular program that involves animals, such as young students that are learning how to read, there are some local agencies that bring therapy animals on campus for a curricular program. Or for instance, at Magnolia, we have some programs that are tied into
Well, we did.
curriculum
I
where the
mean,
dogs come on campus.
Right,
That
but
is
the-
allowed. However, the recommendation as of now has been to not allow faculty and students to bring their service animals on campus, because once the door is opened for one person to bring their therapy animal on campus, the door is open for everyone. And the bigger concern is that where service animals are relegated to, it has to be a dog or a miniature horse, a therapy animal can be any animal under the sun, which would mean that we would have to then start creating a discretion and a roadmap where a teacher might want to bring their python or their chihuahua, or it could be their giant spider.
Well,
So that's
I
where there has
think-
been a concern.
Well, I appreciate all of that, but this is something that the board did. Am I right or wrong? And most
Yes,
of the
ma'am.
people that know about the laws, all of the American Disability Act, they already know what you're saying. They know that. They want to go beyond that, and they're looking at this school board and the incoming school board to make a difference. So I think we may want to reconsider, because that was our rule, okay? And we don't know what's coming in, and who are pet lovers, okay? So just be prepared, because if I'm getting the calls, and I think you might have already told them no, because more than likely you got the call too.
Yes, ma'am.
Before I did. And if you got the call before I did, then the board is not meeting their needs. And if they go to a doctor and get it, or a lawyer, and then they bring in why this chicken, I'm just saying chicken, and I hope the guy don't kill me, I hope my principal didn't kill me, but I love the chicken coming. I even had the chicken in the library, I'm being honest, okay? I mean, but it was very therapeutic, I saw it. I think we need to look into it. I don't think that's going to stand strong, because it's not a national law, and it's not a state law. So to the legal department, I'm saying to you, go back and see what we can do to compromise. And the reason why I'm saying it, I do not think it's going to go away. Okay? So thank you so very much, and Mr. Chair and Dr. Jenkins. Something we definitely.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Gordon. Ms. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the medical marijuana policy, I know we are aligning our policy with federal policy. Apparently, just very recently, Volusia County School Board had a bit of an uproar because of a parent not being able to administer it themselves. So my question, and I spoke a little bit about this with Ms. Fernandez there, but when it comes to guardian or parent, those are the only designations of individuals who can actually administer it. So even if they hired someone to come on a daily basis, they're not able to do that, correct? I mean, they can't have a designee.
Pursuant to statute, it's very clear that a qualified patient may designate no more than one caregiver. The only time a qualified patient may designate more than one caregiver is if the qualified patient is a minor and the designated caregivers are parents or legal guardians. That's pursuant to the state statute. So unfortunately, if you are a student who is able to receive a certification for medical marijuana, the only people that are legally allowed to administer that medication are your certified registered caregivers. And for a minor, the registered caregivers can only be one person, or if you are a minor, it could be both of your parents or
So-
your legal guardians.
So in other words, no.
That's right.
Yeah.
Not
So-
because we don't want to, but because the statute says so.
I
want
have to
make
break it
clear.
down for
Yes.
this non-lawyer types. The other thing is, this is in regard for students, but are we going to, is there a policy for staff? If we're not allowed to store, or, obviously we wouldn't administer it, but.
I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Palmerini
Okay.
because I know I have the answer, but since he's sitting here, I'd like him to answer that.
Your current drug-free workplace policy would not allow this possession.
Okay.
Um,
Even with a
Yeah,
recommendation?
that's right. Because remember, the constitutional amendment that passed exempted certain types of places. It exempted schools and it exempted places of employment.
It
So-
exempted schools unless it is a student
Right,
under the
right.
nursing policy. So it was very clear in the statute that you could not have medical marijuana, and it was at a school, a preschool, on a school bus, et cetera, unless it was pursuant to administration of medicine to students.
We received, at least I did receive that email from a former teacher employee that imploring us to allow that, but right now, so it will not.
Not under the current version of the policy, that's correct.
Right. Okay, thank you.
The specific language says, on the grounds of a preschool, primary school, secondary school, except as provided in 1006, which is the medication of medications for students.
Okay, clarification. Is that our policy, or is that based on state statute or
Well,
federal?
you have this, the constitutional amendment that passed that says it exempts,
constitutional
that exempts schools and places of employment. Your current work-free, or drug-free, let me try that again in English. Your current drug-free workplace policy doesn't have a medical marijuana exception in it.
And the current statute for prescription of medical marijuana clearly states that you may not have medical marijuana on the grounds of a preschool, primary school, secondary school, unless it is pursuant to the statute that is for provision of medication to students.
Okay.
So adults would not have the authority under the statute that allows the certification of medical marijuana to use it on campus. The only group that could receive medical marijuana on campus is a student pursuant to the statute.
Do we know if we have many requests for that? I'm just curious, requests for that, or even any students right now? Okay.
We had one several years ago for CBD oil. That student was incredibly ill. And we have not had any other requests since then, and that was a very, very long time ago.
Okay, thank you.
Flynn, just to piggyback on the concept of how new this entire issue is, the Volusia attorney and I were on a call separate regarding House Bill 7069 before this board meeting, and he brought up the issue and was asking what we were doing because he is struggling. He's dealing with his board who's frustrated over that one individual student. But there are only, of record that we know, two counties that have adopted a policy, even though the policy requirements have been in place for over a year. Part of that delay was everyone expected that there would be some legislative changes taking place in the spring, which didn't come to fruition. So really, through the adoption of this policy, which will simply codify the procedures we have in place and balance them with the existing law to say, if you're a student, you can have medical marijuana. You have to have it administered by your caregiver. That caregiver has to be registered, and you have to be registered as a patient, and you have to do that through the state. And oh, by the way, that can only be your parents if you're under 18. We're simply taking the law and just putting it in our policy, which is why I think a lot of folks haven't done anything yet because they're thinking there's nothing. You're not really adding a whole lot. I hate to say it, but there are some nuances and some questions that we are getting, but not from anyone who's using it. So it's more from representatives and other constituents, not from actual parents of children that need it or employees that may apply for it.
Ms. Cadle?
For some reason, I don't know why, I think that there is a lot of discussion on therapy animals, and I know the conversation has been going on what you can bring on an airplane as a therapy animal, because somebody wanted to bring a peacock and somebody else wanted to bring something else. And so my guess is if there's not federal law right now, if we just give it a little bit of time, I think the airlines are the ones who are kind of leading this discussion on, and I know, I believe that there are some people that are getting prescriptions for their therapy animals so they can take them into the nail salon, or they can take them into some places where historically animals were not allowed. And so we can't move it fast enough for those of us that are in our waning days, but I think that's one of those things that if we just let the federal government kind of deal with what's going on in the other places and we take care of what's in our wheelhouse right now, that it would be a good start.
Ms. Gould.
John, come back to the table. So back to the word exemption. It's, again, kind of my understanding. I get it can't be in schools, but we have a lot of facilities that are not schools or school buses. We have facilities and other things. The way this was explained to me is that the exemption gave the business an opportunity not to have a policy, but if they so chose to have a policy for their employees to be able to bring it to work, they could. Is that true?
I believe that to be the case, yes. What I said is the current version of your drug-free workplace policy right now does not have that.
Right. So it would be at our discretion in that policy, with the exception of what's in the statute, like on school properties, actual teaching facilities.
Yeah.
I
just want to be clear because
The current statute says that it can be in a person's place of employment only if it's permitted by the employee.
Right. Employer.
By the employer,
By
yes.
the
Right.
employer.
Okay, so I just wanted that to be clear to everybody on the board that but go ahead, Woody.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gould, I thought there was a specific exclusion of school property as a place that you can have the medical
Schools or
marijuana.
school property?
But school property is broadly defined as not just the building or the acreage around it with the fields. It's practically every property owned by the school district, and in fact, it extends to
Like this building,
this building.
where we don't have students.
Right? In fact, by some decisions, when the bus pulls up, it's the places that we would have jurisdiction to enforce our rules. So when the bus pulls up to the bus stop and the bus driver's on the bus and the kids get out and the bus driver pulls away, for that very brief period of time, that becomes sort of school property that we have jurisdiction over. If there's a fight, something happens, we have jurisdiction on that property at that moment. Okay, it's a very fleeting glimpse. Most of it, when we think of school property, are physical buildings, property that we own. I do not think there's an exception that allows it for employees on school property, but I'm looking to the team to see.
I mean, the constitutional amendment says medical marijuana has to be allowed except in the following places. It said schools, places of employment. So we aren't.
But does it say schools or school property? I mean, that's the distinction there, because we have places, I mean, I don't think for the next 12 months this is going to be an issue, but I do think it is going to become an issue as people start to utilize this to manage different illnesses.
I would just remind, in Orange County Public Schools, in all of our building, or in most of the buildings that I know of that are quote-unquote non-schools, we still do have students in those buildings. We have students working in this building that are intellectually disabled that come here for on-the-job training. We have students that work at facilities. We have students that work at transportation. We have students that are working in our tech centers, learning, and that may not be technically, it's a college, but if we have our high school students or our intellectually disabled students that are still under that K-12 umbrella on any of those campuses working for any reason whatsoever, I would say that that would be considered a school property as well. So this building most definitely would be. I know that all of our transportation hubs would then be, as well as our technical centers, because we have students from our CBVE programs working at all of those sites. We are
Right.
one of the largest.
But they may also already be users and have the referral or the, whatever it is, the certification.
Right, but if,
So it's,
but if we're
because-
looking at
yeah.
for employees and trying to
Gotcha.
say that certain buildings aren't technically schools, most of the Orange County Public School buildings
Mhm.
are places of learning for some group of student.
And I've actually pulled up the constitutional
Yay.
amendment, Article 10, Section 29, I think it is. It says, limitations, nothing in this section shall allow, and it says, shall require any accommodation of any on-site medical use of marijuana in any correctional institution or detention facility or place of education or employment, or smoking medical marijuana in any public place. That's the language of the constitutional amendment. So could a place that does not have students be a place of employment? Well, yes, it most certainly would, because we have employees who show up at
Right.
places that, even our facilities, that don't have students.
okay. All right, thank you for the clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great discussion. Mr. Howard, you had a great comment to me yesterday. What was it we were taking up? I found it very funny. I'm going to put you on the spot. He's not going to repeat it. Something like God in the schools and marijuana on the same night. So I don't do it justice. It was funnier when Scott said it. In God we trust. And anyway, bada bang. It's lost its oomph. Yeah, I'm being recorded. Ask me if I care. So, okay. With that, we are adjourned. Mr. Howard, I do need to ask you a question. Ms. McGowan, I need to ask you a question too, please.
That just made my night.